but don't steal my
No, I
volume
was thinking
control.
to help you.
Okay. Excellent. So hi, thank you very much for being here. So my name is Sandra Paoletta. I am an associate professor at the Media Technology Interaction Design department, and I was with the funding from NAVET. I run a project called the Radio Sound Studio Project, and it's a collaboration with a number of people here at KTH, or they were here at KTH, both postdocs, students, an associate professor, etc., and Henrik Frisk from KMH, Royal College of Music, and Mikael Johansson, who is a sound engineer and also Foley artist for the Swedish radio. So the aim, let's say, for the initial aims of the project were to connect practices, creative practices in historical sound design, in particular Foley. And for those of you who perhaps don't know what Foley is the creation of sound effects in real time, usually to the picture, usually to film, but they are also done in radio, for radio plays and things like that, by a performer. So by an artist that is just making those sound effects in real time to the picture usually, or for a story, a radio play or something like that will be played in the radio. Okay? So the important aspect of that kind of sound design is the performance. The fact that what makes a sound better than another is the performance that the actor or the artist does. So what kind of emotions they bring, what kind of touch that they bring to the objects they use to make sound. So normally they use totally mundane objects. So, and you will see some examples of that. Okay? So they make some very sophisticated and interesting and emotional sounds. And in the digital world, we try to also create interesting, complicated, complex sounds with digital technology. And that is normally called sonic interaction design, when you're doing a sound that is meant to be interactive, right? But there are much more difficulties to do that in the digital world, and I believe for a long time, that we can learn a lot by the practices of Foley artists. So this project was very much trying to connect what we can learn from historical practices and what we can bring to the digital world. And so in particular, let's say the aim was to explore sound, action, and interactions associations. And in the end, within the project, what we did was we studied a number of things, but in the end, let's say in practice, we developed, exhibited, and evaluated three prototypes, three examples of models that were created from three example historical sounds that I will show you in a second. Okay, let's go next. So one example of the type of sounds we were inspired by is this sound here, created by this machine. There's actually a sound machine that has the only purpose of making this sound. And this, we called it the creaking machine. So this is one example of the sound objects that were shown to us by Mikael, which has obviously at the Swedish radio an enormous library of objects with which you can do sounds. And obviously this object its sole function is to create this kind of sounds that you can imagine can be used for creaking floorboards, opening doors, and things like that. So we used ethnographic methods, in the sense we observed the practice of Michael, we did in-depth semi-structured interviews, and etc. We used those results in ideation workshops with music students and interaction design students to imagine, to develop new potential interfaces or new ways of creating this kind of sounds, but in the digital world. And then we develop prototypes and etc. So just to give you an example, I already mentioned the creaking machine, but we also selected two other very mundane objects to create sounds. But there is all a story behind the choice of these objects. So one were old Swedish clocks, okay, and one was a wooden spoon wrapped with a wet cloth scraping on a rock, okay. And this was used because they were both part of a real radio play, Swedish radio play, set in the Viking times. And these objects were used to give particular impressions in the radio play. So the Swedish clocks, not so much to give the sense of footsteps, but in actual fact to give a sense of presence in a home. It is the radio, so you cannot see anything, but you have to know somehow that there is a body. Okay? You have to give a body to the voice. And that was a way of giving the body to the voice. And the other thing was supposed to be, at one point, someone used to do a, how do you call it, a sacrifice to the gods. And to do that, they had to spread butter on rocks. Okay? And so this was the way in which Michael did that. Okay, so we use these different points of inspirations to go into this workshop with students from the Royal College of Music and from KTH to think of different ways. And I cannot explain to you all that we did in the workshops, but there is a paper that explains very well the kind of exercises that we did, which were both kind of, exercises to expand your imagination and then also to sort of converge and focus on ideas. But you can imagine that sort of sketch of a sort of seesaw kind of thing ended up being related to the creaking machine, because you can imagine obviously this kind of movement might be connected to that. But we actually imagined every interface, we imagined how they could connect to every different kind of sounds as well. Anyway, this one was related to, in any case, to or was inspired by the clogs, but they imagined this thing where you could lean back and forth and left and right to create different kind of footsteps. And then we had another design here with a sort of a round sort of movement that you would do to create a sound, and this was another potential interface of a cube where you could mix sort of sounds by pressing different bits. We chose some of these ideas. There were many ideas. We couldn't implement them all, but we chose a few, and we started sort of developing in the digital world and with sensors and things like that and actuators to create these new interfaces for those kind of sounds using procedural audio and physical modeling and experimenting with different interfaces and programming languages. And we ended up with these three prototypes, which we called in slightly funny different ways. But you can imagine, obviously, that Futaluta is related to that sketch that you saw earlier. This Krikso is related to the seesaw kind of thing that you saw earlier. And the bicycle wheel is related to this sketch, spiral kind of sketch you saw earlier, and to the scraping type sound of the wooden spoon. Okay, and so these different interfaces that afford different kinds of movements, and perhaps also the mind, can ask you to move the whole body rather than just 2 fingers or etc. Are afforded a different way of exploring those sounds or similar sounds that we synthesize. And we went to to exhibit this, to also workshop this at the Tekniska Museet, and we had about more than 100 people. Obviously, as you know, in the museum there are often families, kids, so we had all sorts of ages and reactions. We did a very, very simple sort of evaluation, and so we ended up, let's say, with a winner out of these three, but prototypes. That is not very important, but they could give us some feedback about what seemed to work and what seemed to be a bit strange or could be improved, and etc. So, for example, the winner was the Krixo, which you can see here, and it's a bit of a funny sound, and the kids in particular liked it very much because it's a bit funny, but also because it allowed quite a lot of control, and you could really do quite scary sounds and squeaky sounds, etc. So let's try. So very briefly, I think we learned a lot of things by doing this process, in particular how we can sort of ideate and really go really quite far away from the original inspiration, but also remaining connected to that inspiration using the methods that we sort of developed. And so, you know, you can do a sort of a rapid ideation from Foley to sonic interaction design. It is perhaps an easier way to be able to think of simple gesture, how to connect simple gesture to complex sounds, because that's the advantage of Foley. You can, you know, you make very complex sounds with just doing this, you know, but you can do very different kind of emotional nuances just with a simple gesture. To do that in the digital world is not so easy, because we still think in terms of parameter, we connect this parameter to that parameter, etc. And that's not the way the real world really works. And perhaps this is one way to think new ideas in a better way. And let's say the results of this, well, this is part in a way of part of my research for quite a long time. So this kind of results and methodologies have been used in a number of projects, and in particular, at the moment, I have 3 projects. One is called Sound for Energy, where we create sounds or sonic interaction designs in connection to energy. So you can imagine 2 very different things, how to connect them. These things can be helpful. And then I have a project on personalization of sonic interactions, and a project called Lullaby that relates sound and sleep. And we are integrating, embedding sounds in mundane objects, like, for example, blankets. So we made sonic blankets that make sounds when you move. There are 2 main publications after this. One is this one, and one was mentioned a little bit earlier. But then obviously, as I say, the inspiration is also feeding in the new projects. And that's it.
Thank you very much.